Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're tackling a massive topic, the English Revolution. We're talking about a century of chaos that saw a king lose his head, a republic rise and fall, and the entire concept of power in England get turned completely upside down.
So what was this all about? Well, it boils down to one simple yet incredibly explosive question. Who's in charge here? Is it the king, ruling by divine right, or is it Parliament, the people's representatives? This wasn't some quiet debate, This was a fight that would literally tear the country apart.
All right, so here's our game plan. We'll start by looking at where this beef between the crown and Parliament even came from. Then we'll see how a new royal family, the Stuarts, threw gasoline on the fire. That leads us straight into the Civil War, and yep, the execution of a king. From there, we'll check out England's wild attempt at being a republic, and we'll wrap it all up with the Glorious Revolution, which finally settled the score.
Okay, to really get why this whole thing blew up, we've got to rewind the clock, way back. We're talking centuries before the Revolution, to a single piece of parchment that first put a limit on a king's power.
You've probably heard of it, the Magna Carta. Now this great charter wasn't something the king just graciously offered up. Oh no, it was forced on him by a bunch of powerful barons who were just plain sick and tired of his tyrannical rule.
And you have to understand what a huge deal this was back in 1215. The idea that a king couldn't just do whatever he wanted, that people had rights, like a trial before being thrown in jail, this was revolutionary stuff. And these ideas right here planted the seeds for the massive conflict that was coming.
Okay, let's jump forward to the 17th century. A new family is on the throne, the Stuarts, and they walk in with a totally different attitude about who's really the boss.
So here are the major players you need to know from the Stuart dynasty. It all kicks off in 1603. The famous Queen Elizabeth I, the last of the Tudors, dies without an heir, so the crown goes to her cousin, who's already King of Scotland. He comes down to England as James I, and he brings a whole new and very problematic philosophy of kingship with him.
See, James I and his son, Charles I, were all about the divine right of kings. They truly believed that God had put them on the throne, and they answered to God alone, not to Parliament, not to the people, nobody. This quote from James really shows you how he saw the whole system. The church supports the king, and the king has absolute power. End of story. So here it is, the collision course. On one side, you have the monarchies saying, our power comes from God and we're above the law. And on the other, you have Parliament saying, no way. We approve the taxes and you have to follow the law just like everyone else. It's a showdown waiting to happen. By 1628, Parliament had had enough of King Charles I's abuses, so they basically drew a line in the sand. They hit him with this document, the Petition of Right, which was really just them saying, hey, remember the Magna Carta? You need to start respecting the law.
And these weren't just abstract ideas. The king was literally throwing people in jail without a trial if they didn't give him money. He was forcing families to let his soldiers live in their homes. The Petition of Right was a direct pushback against this stuff, a clear list of grievances.
And what did Charles do? He basically said, thanks, but no thanks. Dissolved Parliament and decided to rule all by himself for the next 11 years. This period is literally called the 11 Years' Tyranny. His refusal to compromise basically made a violent conflict inevitable. And by 1642, the time for talking was over. The English Civil War had begun. So the country splits right down the middle. You've got the Royalists, called Cavaliers, fighting for the king. And on the other side, the Parliamentarians, nicknamed Roundheads. And Parliament had a secret weapon, a guy named Oliver Cromwell. He was a military genius who built their army into an incredibly disciplined fighting force called the New Model Army. And that army, well, it changed everything. After years of horrible, bloody fighting, the New Model Army won. King Charles I was captured. Now, just stop and think about that for a second. The reigning king of England was now a prisoner of his own people. The unthinkable had happened. Mark this date down, because it's a huge one. Parliament put their own king on trial for treason, and they found him guilty. On January 30th, 1649, King Charles I was executed, publicly beheaded. The shockwaves from this act were felt all across Europe. An anointed king killed by his own subjects. The monarchy was officially over. So now what? What does a country that's only ever known kings do when all of a sudden there isn't one? Well, England tried something completely new. This period is called the interregnum, meaning between reigns. First, they set up a republic called the Commonwealth, run by what was left of Parliament. But pretty quickly, real power ended up with the army's commander, Oliver Cromwell. He even got a new title, Lord Protector.
But see, even the winners couldn't agree. The parliament that ruled was called the Rump Parliament, because a colonel had kicked out every member who didn't want to execute the king. This tiny, radical group really struggled to govern. Eventually, Cromwell got so fed up, he just dismissed them entirely. And that's when England's republic really turned into a military dictatorship, with Cromwell in charge, backed by the power of his army.
Well, Cromwell's republic didn't last. After he died, the monarchy came back. But there was still one more twist in the tale, one final, bloodless showdown to settle the question of power once and for all.
So, the monarchy is restored with Charles II, and things calm down for a bit. But then, his brother, James II, becomes king. And this is a huge problem for Parliament, because James is a Catholic. In Protestant England, this brought back all the old fears of a king who would try to become an absolute ruler.
This time, Parliament didn't mess around. In a brilliant political move known as the Glorious Revolution, they basically fired the king. They invited the Protestant ruler of Holland, William of Orange, and his wife Mary, who just happened to be James II's own daughter, to come and take the throne. James fled, and the whole thing happened without a war. This was the ultimate power move. Parliament didn't just beat a king, they hired a new one.
And to make sure this could never happen again, they made William and Mary sign a contract, the Bill of Rights. This document put it all down in black and white. No new taxes without Parliament's approval. No personal army for the king. Free speech in Parliament. It legally, and for good, made Parliament the supreme power in England.
So, in the end, this wasn't just about ending a century of fighting. The English Revolution laid the foundation for constitutional monarchy, the idea that a ruler's power should be limited by law. It set the stage for representative governments around the world, leaving us with a really big question to think about.